All right, we're back. It's Comp 2007, summer 2016, at Georgian, and it's week 12, part 1 of our broadcast. We're talking about shopping cart today. Right, so I want to get that shopping cart functionality baked in for you guys, right? So that's what we're really talking about. This is the main thing of this lecture. One thing I got to point out is I'm going to go to the general site here, and one of the things we have up here is there's some concern. There's talks about a couple things. For example, we have this thing is like, should we make a practical exam, or should we go with something like a presentation? And people said, well, we want more, a presentation over a practical exam. And then I kind of said, like, after my calculation, I'm calculating that you probably have enough marks so you don't need an exam. So I asked people, what would they rather have? There's a lot of people that would rather do, no exam whatsoever, right? So that was the other option, right? So no exam. And that's what this is, no exam. I don't think anybody actually said we want an exam, right? Like, I really want an exam. It shouldn't be optional. Everyone should have to write. I don't think there's anybody that said that. There was no one that said no, right? So I think, there's only 18 people answered, though, out of 81 or 84. But, at least this way, we have some kind of consensus as to no one wants that. The other thing is that some people said, Mansi was asking, should we have Lab 5, should we do Lab 5 in groups? Lab 5 is going to be posted today, or it's actually posted already. And one of the questions was, should we do it in groups? And my answer should be, I'm okay with it. I'm okay if you guys do it in groups, right, for Lab 5. Part of the reason was workload is something that she brought up, and other people agreed. So if you're interested, please vote, if you want to do this stuff in groups. And there's so many people that have kind of said, 8 people so far have said, yes. A couple of people said no. But I remember what I'm going to say is doing it in groups is optional. So, that's something that we can talk about. So doing Lab 5 in groups for me would be an optional thing. Let's bring up, actually at the break, what I'll do is I'll bring up the lab details. But what I want you to do with the lab is, from the stuff that we're going to be doing today, we're going to migrate. We're going to do some code-first migrations. That's another part of what we're doing today. We're talking about code-first migrations. What happens when bad things happen? We're talking about that today. Bad things happen to good people, and you're working on your database, things aren't working properly, and you're in trouble, and it's a cluster. I don't want to say what kind of cluster, right? And you're getting angry, and your database isn't working. Should you panic? The answer is no, don't panic. There's ways around that, and we're going to talk about how to fix it. Here's what I want you to do for now, all right? No, don't panic. Here's what I want you to do for now. I want you today, for this lesson, I want you to pull up Azure. So I'm going to go to portal.azure.com. And I've actually created a third database, right? And I recommend this highly for this one. Because if you mess with this database you're working with today for assignment 2 and your final project, there's a good chance if you use this database for your Lab 5, especially with what I'm doing right here, it'll completely mess up assignment 2 and your final project. So please make another database and another location that we can play with for Lab 5 only, all right? So how do I do that? Again, it'd be the same thing. I've just created another database. So move these around so you can see those. So there's 3 databases that are COMP 2007 now, right? One of them is the original one, then there's version 2, and now I've made version 3. So if I click on this one, you can see that this is COMP 2007 v3, and it's it's using Central US, so a different location. Again, so far I've made 3, no problems. I recommend make another one for today's lab. So while I'm dropping all my database tables, because I'm going to do that right now, right? Please create your database for us so that way we can do Lab 5 and there'll be no issues. Okay. So how am I going to drop those tables? I'm going to use, actually, instead of Visual Studio, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up SQL Server Management Studio, and I'm going to just turn off Visual Studio for a second. I did get a blue screen of death when I tried to do both at the same time earlier today, but that's only because of my, it's simply because of my virtual machine limits, right? So I'm going to try and do just, SQL Server Management Studio alone, right? And notice that I'm hitting V2, my database V2, because I don't have an assignment 2 and a final project, so I'm not going to hurt anything. My final project is the MVC Music Store, right? So I'm okay. For you guys, please set up another database to do this. Okay, so I'm connecting to the database. And again, I do recommend SQL Server Management Studio for this kind of work. What's the fastest way to drop all the tables in the database? Drop the database, right? Now, again, this would be a career limiting move. If there's actual vital data that's on there, that would be very bad. What do they say? A resume generating event, that they call that as well up on Microsoft Virtual Academy. I agree, it's bad. Please don't do this if you have a live server. If you're testing, we're just doing testing some stuff. It's okay to do that. So I'm going to go right click in the Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio, and I'm going to click on delete. That will drop the table from the database. And if you see here, delete object, I'm going to click on the table to delete. I can see that it's already slowing down, right? It's calculating. This is the object I want, and I'm going to click on OK, right? It's going to cycle for some time as it's executing this function, because it's going to try and drop everything in the database. Like I said last time, it kind of killed my machine doing this because I only have a little virtual machine with not a lot of memory. So far, it looks like we're good. Whenever we drop tables and add tables to a database, just the tables alone, you're going to give Azure a few moments, okay? Please don't hammer at the database and go, where is it? Where is it? Where is it, right? It's going to give you issues, right? Number one. And the second thing is, if you drop a whole database and recreate a whole database on Azure, that's further issues for you. So I highly recommend not to do that either, right? So just take it easy and take a few seconds to catch your breath while you drop the database stuff, right? And then come back to it. So by now you should have generated your database, your new server, and please do that today. Don't use the server that's being used for assignment 2 and final project, because what we're going to do today is going to kill that whole database, just like I showed you, right? That would be very bad. Okay, so I'm launching Visual Studio. I do have a project that I'm going to share with you. It's going to be based off a template. I'm going to do a new project, and I'll give me a few moments. I'm going to set up a template for you guys and put it up on GitHub that you can download and start from for Lab 5, right? And I'm going to use the shop cart template that I made, which is going to be lesson 12C, obviously, right? And click OK. This is going to generate the lesson and all the details that we have for lesson 12 that we're going to use for today's example of today's demos are going to be based off this lesson, right? And as you can see, we have quite a few classes and objects here. What I'm going to do here for sure is do a build. I'm going to build my solution, and we're just going to add all the NuGet packages and make all the connections that I need for this project, right? Just to make sure that it's working, I'm going to run this thing. So I'm going to kind of run this thing in Chrome. I'm not going to connect. I'm not going to hit the store. I'm just going to run this thing so I can see that it connects with IIS. You all right? Yeah. Okay. So it does connect with IIS, and that's all I want. I don't want to register right now or log in or anything. Right now I have 0 tables because I've dropped all my tables in the database. Here's what happens, and I just want to mention this as well. When I run this project, if I log in, it's going to generate the tables for my security in the database. So the security tables are going to be generated, number 1. 2, if I log in, or if I don't log in, and if I access the store link, it's going to generate the store tables in the database, which is all the tables we have so far. For example, things like album and artist and those kind of things. All that, the genre. Those things are going to be generated for us in the database, and it's going to happen through a file that's inside of our models called sampledata.cs. This one here, where we drop create database if model changes. We're going to play with this today. This is just a preview. This is going to be key for us to make this happen. Also, this model is slightly incorrect because, and I did it slightly differently in class 1 and class 2, but we have a problem with our URLs for the image. The image URL, if you look down here, so I want to do this later on, is content images placeholder. Well, there is no content images placeholder in our project. It is actually assets images placeholder. So we need to change all these before we add them to the database, right? So I recommend Control F. And I want to kind of target, again, it's content images, right? That's what I'm targeting. And I'm going to replace with asset images. You can see I've already done this. I'm going to click on Replace All. And what this is going to do is going to take 246 occurrences replacements inside my sample data, right? So that way I have the real link, the right link, when I set this stuff up. Okay, so kind of save that. I haven't yet used it, but this is what I want to share with you, so you don't have to do it later on. Okay. Also, one thing I noticed when I was doing this a couple times now is I had to update NuGet one more time, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to go into Manage NuGet Packages for Solution, and inside my updates, I can see there's a couple updates. One is Bootstrap went to 3.37. That's okay. Still doesn't fix the Bootstrap jQuery issue, so we're going to leave it at 2.24, right? But also jQuery validation went to the next level, 1.151. So let's leave that alone, and we've done those updates. There's one, I'm not going to touch this one. We're going to browse for additional packages later on that I'm going to do. But for now, we have our entire package ready to go, and I'm just going to upload this to the web. So I'm going to go to Team Explorer. I'm going to go to any changes to the package. You can see there's tons of changes here that I just made. I'm going to add them in. I'm going to say initial commit, right? And when I click commit staged, when I go home, and when I click sync, I'm going to open up a new Git repository for this one, and it's going to be under Georgian College called COMP2007, Summer 2016, Lesson 12C. This is the one that I want you to use for your Lab 5. All right, so I'm going to click publish. And now you've got it up online. So you can please download that one. What I'd like you to do is please change the connection strings in your web config. So I'm going to go to web config for a second. Please change the connection strings in here so they don't point to my database. That would be very bad if I was doing a demo and then you guys are messing with my database. It just wastes everyone's time. So please don't do that. Use your own third database that you just created, hopefully, with me, so that you don't mess up anyone's connections or whatever, and that you can use this for testing purposes. Hey, on this, I'm going to be using, just from a walkthrough perspective, we're going to continue doing the walkthrough, but there's going to be some issues. So I'm going to go to courses, and the link for this one is the MVC Music Store project, right? And if I look down here, if I scroll down, you can see that we're supposed to be around part 8. Let's go to part 9 for a second. I'm going to kind of do this a little bit ahead. I'm going to go to part 9, then go back to part 8. Part 9, if I go all the way to the bottom, talks about this custom error stuff, and I want to kind of fix that first. So there's our custom error view, because right now if I go to my site, and let's generate that now for the first time. If I run this project, let's run it. And if I go to, I'm not going to run the database yet, that portion, not yet. But if I go to the, if I start running this in IIS, and if I try and type in some gobbledygook like this and go in, I'm going to get this diagnostic error, right? That's nice for us because we're developers, but terrible for users, because users are going to see a bunch of stuff we don't want to see. It's actually a security issue. One of the things they're going to see is my version number, right, for ASP.NET, which is not good. They shouldn't know what my version number is. They should not understand the .NET framework version. They should not know those things. These are things that, you know, maybe a smart user could use them to somehow undermine the security of our database, which we don't want. So please don't do those. Don't leave these in place. Let's make a custom 404 page. That's one of the ancillary technologies we're going to learn about today. How do I make a custom 404 page? Well, if I go back to the example that John Galloway gave us, he talked about just changing the error view on the website, and that's nice, but it won't solve a problem. Let's check this out. So what he's asking is, hey, copy this stuff. Use this as a code snippet. Okay, and if I go back to the error view, which is under, I'm going to just stop debugging here for a second. If I go to the error view, which is under views, shared, error.cshtml, you can see that we have a basic view when my Visual Studio comes up that says, hey, error. Here's what comes up. Text danger, error, there's a problem, right? But I never get to this thing. And the reason why I never get to it is because even though I have a custom view, it doesn't come up. Let's replace it with what he talked about. So Control C, Control V. There's the new view, right? Which is, we're sorry, we hit an unexpected error. Hey, go back. If you click, this little JavaScript here will allow us to click here to go back one. Basically, if you click the back button, it does the same thing. All right, cool. And you'd be forgiven to think that if you kind of run this thing now, so if I run this without debugging, so Control F5, or if you go to debug, start debugging, or start without debugging, it's okay. If I go to shared error, it says, I don't know what you're talking about, Tom. There is no shared error, right? And if I try and type some weird stuff, I'm still going to get this diagnostic problem like this, right? Still get diagnostic error. So just changing the error.cshtml obviously is not going to be the solution to this, right? There's another step we have to take. We have to change, the first part is changing our web config. So if I go to web config, we want to change our add stuff to a web config, and the place to add it into is inside where it says, make sure you're hitting the right web config. I'm hitting the wrong one. There's two web configs, remember. I want this one, the one that's inside of the root of our folder, where on after line 21, there is system.web. The system.web element, inside there, we want to add another element for our custom error, right? That's what we want to add. So I'm going to kind of go in there, and under our system web element, I'm going to type in custom errors. So custom errors, I'm going to turn my mode right now. There's three options: off, so I don't get custom errors; on, I always get custom errors; or remote only if someone's remote and it's an actual user, not us doing development. We'll get custom errors. Oh, sorry, they will, but we won't. We'll get diagnostic errors. Let's just turn it on for now to see how this works. And what we want to do is we also want to default redirect. That's what we want to do to where it's going to go. I want to use tilde error. That's our custom location, right? And what I want to do is I want to close this off. So I want to close off this tag. So this tag closes off. And inside the tag, I want to kind of describe the error that we want to listen for. So one of the errors, first of all, we want to tell it where to redirect. We want to redirect to tilde error, right? And then someplace called not found. Not found. All right, that's one part. So is there a not found right now? Is there a page like that? The answer is no. And then we want to put the status code. The status code is 404. So we're listening for a 404 status code. When we get that, we're going to go to this page, error not found. Well, that's not going to work, obviously, because we don't have a not found page. So how can we make this work? Well, we're going to make a new controller, an error controller. So I'm going to right-click on controllers, and I'm going to add a new controller. We're going to make this an empty controller, MVC5. Can't answer that phone right now, wife. And I know, it's every time. And then click add, right? And we're going to call this error controller, right? Error controller. Click add. All right, cool. Now it's scaffolding out a blank controller. And what we want to do here is we want to define some simple things to put in. And it's going to be a different kind of controller than we've seen before. One is that instead of an action result, we're going to change this to a view result. That's a totally different thing. A view result actually renders a view, and we can use a partial to do that. We're going to pass in the folder, which is error. All right, that's what the folder name would be called. So error would be the place to go, almost like views error. And then the next one, we need to make one more view, public view result. And we're going to call this, of course, not found. That's what we put in our config file, right? And we're going to do a response dot status code. Status code is equal to 404. So that's going to be the status code we're going to set, and then we're going to return the view with not found. That's basically what we're saying is, hey, post not found to the view. When it hits not found, what's going to happen is it's going to generate that error code, and our error.cshtml is going to be the one that's going. Because if I do this error, right, what this does is it goes into the shared error.cshtml, and it triggers that. That's what's going to be triggered there. And if I go further into my not found, it's going to basically send in my not found page. All right, so let's see how this works. So now I've got all the components. So there's 3 components. One, let's change my CSHTML error.cshtml page for my custom page. So it uses my layout CSHTML plus my error code. By the way, you could also make a full custom controller here with its own views if you really want to, and you can make a view for each of your error codes if you really want to as well. But this will suffice, as you'll see. Second, I want to change my web config so that we have, again, within our system web, this custom error element with the error that we're tracking, which is 404, with the proper redirects, number 2. And third, we need a controller, right, to basically handle this stuff from happening from a routing perspective. Now when I run this thing, I run it with debugging again, I can see that if I go into a random link or something like that, let's see when I get this, finally comes up, there we go. If I go into some random link like la la la, it gives me a custom error page. It doesn't give me my diagnostic error anymore, okay? It gives me my nav bar, and it gives me my, hey, sorry, or oops, you got to the wrong page, right? So this is custom 404 page, right? Again, there's 3 things I need to do. I got the code from my walkthrough, right? So this is where I got the code. Second part was modifying the web config, right? Web config is right here on between line 21 and 28 inside your web config on the root of your folder. You're going to see a place that's system web. You want to put that in there. Custom errors mode on. Again, the other one would be remote only, right? Once you've done this piece, then we set up our controller, our error controller with these 2 methods, but they're both view result type methods, not action result, totally different kind of methods, right? And when we have those 2 happening, or all those 3 pieces, when we go to the web, then we see this custom view that comes up when there's an error, okay? Now this is good and it's bad. It's good in that we make it a little bit nicer from a user experience perspective, but it might be bad for us from a debugging perspective because we'll never see any more diagnostic errors here on the window, which is okay for now. I don't expect that there's going to be a lot of them. Okay, so we've done our custom error stuff. Let us add in that stuff to GitHub. So I'll go changes. If you notice, I've added an error controller, and I'll add that in. I'll say added error controller and modified web.config to promote custom error pages. There we go. Commit staged, home, and sync, and then push. So that'll give you everything you need for that. Okay, cool. So we've got that custom error stuff going on. Let's keep moving now. Okay, I'm going to go back to where we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be on part 8, and I want to start building out the shopping cart. Okay. So we need to add a few things to the shopping cart, but before we go there, what I'd like to do is to show you how this thing works as is, and I want to talk about some error tracking capabilities that are built into Visual Studio that we haven't really talked about so far, right? So if I run this thing in Chrome again, one more time, with debugging, right? And what I'm going to do, remember, we don't have any tables right now at all, right? So what I want to do is if I kind of want to crunch this over here from this part, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this Visual Studio stuff and I'm going to put it so that we see it kind of crowded over here for a second. So you can see it on one screen. And I'm going to open this up. This is kind of our diagnostic tools area. I'm going to open this up a little wider and drop this down a little bit more. Maybe even scrunch this up here because, I mean, the Solution Explorer doesn't have to be seen right now. You can see that we've got a couple of responses right now for what's happening. Right now, what's happened is I did a GET request right into our main link, and you saw that we did a browser link up here. This is what we're going to be using for our diagnostics on the left-hand side in our diagnostics tool. I'm going to click Home. Oh, sorry, Store. Store will start generating some other additional events. Remember, we do not have any kind of tables. So what it's going to do It's an asynchronous call to the store, and then it says execute scalar, right? It says, well, we don't have a database, so create the database. There's our command for creating the database here. All right, so it's going to go out to Azure, right? And it's going to say, hey, Azure, COMP2007 v2. I want to go to that server, and I want to add a new database, right? I'm going to create my database. Now remember, the more this delays, right, the longer it takes. And I want you to not be afraid if this crashes or says, oh man, it's going to error. It's erroring out, Tom. It's done it right. It's already done it right. Here's a great example of how this is happening. It says system.data.SQL client and whatever, timeout expired. Should you panic? And the answer is no, you should not. Just try it again, right? And I mean that only because we dropped the tables, and I'm trying to generate the tables on the fly here, and I'm hammering my little SQL database, and I've been hammering it all day, by the way, right? To try and drop and recreate the table. So it's okay to try this again, right? So it says, hey, stop at this exception. Let's try this out, right? So I'm going to, again, I'm going to stop debugging. Excellent. And what I want to do is run the debug again, run it in Chrome again, one more time. And what I want to do is hammer that table one more time. So hopefully we'll be able to get a better response. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to click Store. And now it's going to go back and try and recreate those tables again. OK, now I'm getting a better response. Take a look. And here's what's happening. Tell me what's happening here. Take a look. What's happening on the table. So I'm adding in, I'm adding in, I'm adding in. And if you notice, as it's coming up, it's adding in one item at a time. And this is happening because of your sample data. Your sample data is going out there and adding in all the data to the table. Now, when I'm done adding all the table to my all the data to my table, I have this. I have a bunch of this stuff happening, and you can see if I hit the classical, I can go here, and every time I do something, I'm getting a response, here on the left-hand side, right? I'm selecting data from the table, and I'm also getting the proper artwork now because we've updated our links to our assets images. Right? So I'm getting the artwork here. Okay. Again, if you look on the left, every time I click something, if I go back, I'm going to go back to my store. And if you see that, I'm going to get a list of my store. I can see what I'm doing. I'm executing the select statement. This is the select statement. You can actually inspect what the select statement looks like. Okay, and this is what's happening here. So I want to use this because right now what we have is a database, and I'm going to wipe this database out, right, a bunch of times. Let me go back. Here's what happens when I register. When I kind of register for the first time, I've already done this a bunch of times, but you can see that as soon as I register, it's creating tables in our database. Okay, let's try this out. So I'm going to go with admin.example.com and put in a complicated password. Do it again. And register. Let's see what happens when I register. So it creates the tables really quickly. And you can see what it did. It posted the account register, an asynchronous call, right? And then it redirects back to here to the main page once I've registered and logs me in. Okay, so that's all been done. All right, great. Let's stop this for a second. I'm just going to X out of here and open this up to see what happened with the database table. And I'm showing you this because we have to inspect the database tables a couple of times, right? So if I look at my database, and if I go to 2007, look at the tables, I should see now a full list of tables, both the security tables, because I went and registered, and the store tables, because I did a list of the store. I went to the store menu, and I found all those things, right? I did all the tables. And this is fine, right? But remember, this is what code first migration is. Imagine if I'm now going to change the model, make new connections with my tables that exist, new foreign keys that are going to connect and create relations with those tables. That is a material change. Once I make that kind of material change, I have to perform something called code first migrations. If I don't do that properly, then it will not update the table, and we're going to get an error when we run the site. So if you notice now, I have albums, artists, and genre, but I need more tables than that. I need a cart table, I need an order table, I need an order details table, I need other tables that are going to be in there, and I don't have those right now, so we're going to have to build those out. So here's the first class. I want to add these three classes in the models, right? So the cart class, the order class, and I also want to add in the order detail class. Let's add those in. So this is going to go right into the models folder, right? So let's just close some of these up so you can see that a little nicer. So in the models folder, I'm going to right click and I'm going to add, again, a different classes. So here's our cart class. That's the first one. And there's our cart class. Let me add in a couple more. The other one I'm going to add in here is the order class and the order detail class. Add new class, order detail. So we got all those classes in there. And now what we're going to do is we're going to update, just to be preemptive, our music store context. Our music store context, whenever you hear the word context, I want you to think of, just change that to connection in your head. That's the database connection. That's what it means, right? It means that anything that's in the context is, it's going to list a set of tables that are related to this connection, right? Think about it as a container or some kind of grouping of tables that I'm using with this context. Okay, let's add some tables. So I'm going to do a property, and I'm going to say that it is a DB set, right? And the DB set is going to be the first one is going to be the cart. I'm going to make carts, the carts table. So it's going to keep track of all the carts that I'm going to create. Okay, don't confuse this with shopping carts. We'll talk about this later on. All right, the next one is going to be another DB set, which is going to be order of type order, and it's going to be orders. So all the orders. Think about orders as the checkout. When I check out, I have a complete order. I'm going to transfer my shopping cart to my order table. So I'm going to transfer the data from there, right? So orders. And then the last one so far that I need is another DB set of order detail. Oh, just select it, Tom. There we go. Can't type today. And we're going to call this order details. Again, this is just another property. Okay? Remember, whenever we see these get sets, we know they're getter and setter methods. They're just part of the properties of the class. So these are the new ones that we're adding, and I've separated them, but they don't mean anything. One thing I want to do for all of these is add in this public virtual stuff. Virtual means it can be overridden, right? I want you to think of it that way. And I want to just replace public with public virtual. It's going to make our migrations a little bit easier and less error prone. Okay, so public virtual. So we finished off our music store context. And we've done that before we've actually added in a stitch of code in here from a cart perspective or anything else. Let's close up the store controller and the error controller and the error.cshtml and the web.config just to clean up that area. But I want to start with the cart. Okay, so what is the cart? If I look at the cart class as described here, I have a funny issue here, and I want you to tell me why I'm doing this. I'm going to copy this and go over here and then paste it in. What I'm going to do is, there's two things. There's a new attribute called key, and I'm going to just click on this and then press Control decimal, and then hit this first one, which is using system component model data annotations. Okay, I'm also going to add in public virtual on each of these ones too, just again to make a transition a little easier. I'm going to copy these, but I want you to tell me while I'm doing this, and see if you guys can, the people in the class can help me out here. Why am I using the key attribute on this record ID? Why? I never had to do that before, so why am I doing it now? Oops, I did it twice. There you go. Why am I doing it now? Why am I adding a key attribute to my table? Never did it before. Can anyone understand why? Take a look closely at the table. Yes. Well, remember, yes, record ID is the answer, but the reason why I need it in this case, and I never needed it before, is because remember the rules for the keys that I'm going to get, right? Okay, my key, my unique identifier for my table, right, as an example, which is also auto-incrementing by default, unless you say otherwise, right? In this particular case is, take a look. It has to be either the name of the model plus ID, right? It has to be either ID by itself, capital I, lowercase d, or capital I, capital D, or the model, capital I, capital D. One of those four options, right? If I don't have one of those four, it doesn't know what to look for. And I have record ID as well as cart ID, and record ID sits at the top of the class. So instead of confusing it, I want, instead of it choosing cart ID, because it matches the cart, the name of the class, I'm forcing it to use record ID as the key, as the primary key. Okay, that's what I'm doing with the key attribute. The reason why is because the designer of this model wanted to use cart ID as something that we can keep track of, right? As opposed to record IDs for the record of the cart. Now, don't be confused as what this is. There's a couple of components here that I want you to be aware of. One is, I've got a foreign key relationship already here. Foreign key relationship, I'm making a connection, a relation between this new table and the existing tables. Oh man, guess what that means? A code first migration requirement. Once I make a relation, I connect to to another existing table, I've made a connection, a link to that table, I need to change my whole database schema. Just FYI, if you make that kind of change, right? So I'm going to move these around. It doesn't really matter the order, but I'm going to move this one. Move it down over here, right? And I want to put them together because a lot of times when we see this, we get confused, right? We sit there and go, oh yeah, you're adding an album ID. But actually, when you do a foreign key, you need both of these two things, right? You need the album ID and then the album class that I'm relating to. And I like to put these together a lot of times so that way you're related. So it's one album. This cart is actually only one album. It doesn't mean that it's it's relating to the shopping cart. In fact, it's not a really great name. Think about this as the cart itself is just what item or record I'm adding to the shopping cart. So it's one line in the shopping cart, which means it's only one album I'm relating to, right? I have the count, right? Also, it also takes the date this connection was created. So when it gets added into the cart, what this item is, it's one record in the shopping cart. That's what really this is. And that's why I'm not really happy with the name cart, okay? I don't like that name. It should be something else, right? Now you can call it whatever you like. It's not shopping cart, it's just a record. It's my choice or selection, if you will, that I'm adding into the cart. Okay, this is just one line in the cart. This does not give me the details, right? Yeah.
I was just curious why we argued about
You need both. Yeah, when it comes to doing a foreign key, you need both album ID and then the album class, right? Properly. So that's what so when you have both of these two in, it won't give you errors as much. Please don't crash. Well, it's because I'm using a virtual machine and I've been hammering this thing today with stuff, right? So if it crashes, please forgive me. All right. All right. So cart is done, and I wanted to explain that relation. Let's do the next one, which is order.cs. Okay. So I'm going to grab this stuff. All right. I'm going to copy it, this snippet, and go to my order.cs file. This is my order model, and paste it in there. And let's talk about this a little bit. This is stuff we need to talk about. All right, again, just like I said, I'm going to use public virtual here, right? Because it's going to make our transition a little easier. So please modify all these. We're going to have to do this one more time later on, as you'll see. But I want to change all these to public virtual just so when it comes to migrating over to this new database model, we have less problems. And I recommend this as a standard practice when we do this kind of stuff. Okay, here's something that I want to point out here. Well, this is interesting. I've got an order ID, and I've got a username. Well, because my order represents the final order that I get when I add stuff from my cart. I get stuff from my cart, and I'm adding it into an order. The order itself is the order that I'm going to send. So I'm going to ship everything out. So the order should contain all the order items, and maybe that would be a better name than cart. Order item would be really what I'm trying to do, right? And if you notice, I've got my order ID here, my username, first name, last name, address, city, and so on. Oh man, state. I'm not in America, so we'll change this to province, right? And I'm just saying, it's not a big thing. I mean, it kind of bothers me sometimes. So then, postal code, country, phone, email, total. All right, that's good. And then the order date when the order was created, and as well as a list of order details. That's interesting. So a list of order details, not a list of orders itself or carts, because order details is the cart. If I'm looking at one item, which is a cart item, if you will, or order item, but rather all the details from that order item, right? So order details, we haven't talked order details yet, but that's what it's going to contain. So really cart, I want you to think of cart as the order item, not the shopping cart. It's just incorrectly named, but we're going to go with this because this is what we had on the walkthrough, okay? All right, here's our order details. Let's take a look at this. What is that order details? What's this? The order detail ID, the order ID, the album ID. So there's some foreign keys in here. The quantity, which is what we're keeping track of, the unit price, and the album that we're ordering, all right? So let's take this stuff here as well, copy it, and put it in here. This is going to be the same thing. We're going to make this public virtual, and we're going to put the foreign keys together just because I like to do that. Not because you need to do it. You don't, it's not required. So copy, and paste, and paste, paste, paste. And if you notice, anytime I have virtual here, I'm going to move my album ID. Here's my album ID. I'm going to move this down in front of or on top of my album class, right? And I'm going to do the same thing for my order ID. I'm going to move this order ID down on top of the order, right? And then we have our order detail ID. Order detail ID is the ID of each one of these records, right? That's what it is, right? So I want you to think about this. This way it keeps track of the quantity. So each order detail, which is the line in my shopping cart, keeps track of how many I want of the album, right? And then what album am I linking to? So that's what it's, this order detail is going to be added into the order. So one order has a one-to-many relationship with order details. You can call this order items. You know, the detail of the order items is what you're really talking about here, just to give you an idea of what it's relating to. Again, the naming convention to me is important, and it's hard to get the right naming convention when you have so many separate classes that do similar things, right? Is this the only way we can implement a shopping cart? Hell no. This is a very complex way. And this is why I'm going to say what I said to the first classes that we had today, which is, after we're done today, if you want to use my example of a shopping cart that we got from the walkthrough as a template for your final project, go ahead. All right? Please don't kill yourself to do something like this again, right? Because we're going to spend a lot of time doing this. And the other thing I want you to think of is, I know that one of the students from class 2 said, hey, I found a shopping cart plugin for ASP.NET MVC. Is that okay if I use that? Go ahead. Same. Because why? Because it may have security, more security. Might be able to attach into something like PayPal or some other services. Why would I say no to that, right? As long as you satisfy my requirements for my assignment, my project, I'm okay. All right? Please let me know, though, if you're using somebody else's plugin or something, like put it inside your external documentation saying, we use the plugin, this particular plugin, as long as you annotate what it is, or we used your example from class, right? And we modified, instead of album, we used food, whatever the food ID is, or whatever. So you changed your naming convention for your classes and objects. I'm okay with that. Okay, and that's why I'm putting that as a disclaimer, because while we go on, you're going to notice how difficult and challenging this is going to be to make to do properly. So it's quite complex. Okay, so we've done our 3 models, and now we've also done this, our music store, you know, context. We've done the context. We've kind of entered everything in here. The next piece is we want to talk about the business, the logic of the shopping cart. What do we want to do with the shopping cart? The shopping cart is going to have a bunch of parts to it. We're going to have the ability to add to the shopping cart, remove from the shopping cart. By the way, those add and remove functionality, it's going to happen using Ajax, right? So we're going to need a helper class, a view model, something new we haven't seen before, that's kind of in between a view and a model, right? We're going to do that. Then we're going to empty the cart. We have to do that because whenever we migrate the cart from the shopping cart view to the order view. When we do that, we want to migrate or move everything from the cart, the shopping cart, to the order. And we want to empty out the cart so that way if someone goes back and checks it again, it's empty, right? We also want to remove items from cart, like we said, get cart items, and so we can list what they are. We want to count how many items are on the cart, and also get a total of what the items cost, right, at the bottom of the shopping cart. So those are all the things that the shopping cart's going to do. Now the shopping cart class is a very complex class. I'm going to mention this again. I really think it belongs in the controller folder. They've put it in the models folder. And it's kind of between a model and controller, or a model controller, controller model. Probably controller model, be very, very clear. It's kind of a hybrid. It's not quite, doesn't match up with the schema we've been using so far for models. Okay, and we're not going to scaffold too many things out of this. So we'll see how this works. Okay, so let's take a look at how to do this. First of all, we know there's a problem right away because we can't do music store entities. We don't have that. We have music store context. So let's create a shopping cart class that's inside of our models. All right, so I'm going to go to models, and I'm going to add a new shopping cart class. So a new class called shopping cart. Okay, there we go. So there's a shopping cart class. We know we have to tag into our models namespace. So I'm going to just say using comp, even though we're in there already, COMP2007, summer 2016, whatever, models. We're going to add that in there too. Because I want to access that folder. I want to connect to this folder anyway, even though we're in there. And then on top, we're going to put in a reference to our context. So we're going to say music store context, right? And then we're going to call it storedb is equal to a new music store context. And again, what this does, think about context as connection. I'm creating a database object that I can use to connect to the database. That's what I'm doing here, right? So that's unique because that's not this one. Then we have a couple of other ones I want to talk about. We have a private property as well as a session key that we're going to use. I'm going to copy these two. I'll talk about these a little bit at a time. I can't talk about the entire shopping cart, I'll tell you right now, because it would take us a couple of lessons just to talk about just the shopping cart and put it together, create an order and everything else by hand, and then fool around with it, mix it up. We don't have time for that. So I'm going to talk about the main parts of the shopping cart class, and that's why I said it's a very complex one. Could you do this a little easier? Absolutely. And I would think about doing things all on the back end and very little on the front end. They do kind of a back end, front end view where they use Ajax to kind of update the shopping cart, right? Nice idea, more complex. All right, so what is this doing? So I've got a shopping cart ID, which is a a private property that I'm using inside the shopping cart. I've also got a string called a cart session ID, right? Which I'm just calling cart ID. We're going to use this later on. Okay, now there's a couple of additional methods that I want you to see. One is, notice that it's a static shopping cart, right? Static shopping cart. We're using shopping cart to name shopping cart, right? To reference the get cart method. Now there's two of these. There's one here and one here, which means it's a overloaded method. But notice the static keyword. I'm going to copy these things for a second. Copy and put it into here. Notice the static keyword. Why the static keyword? Why would I make them static? Well, just like it says here, it's helper methods. I want you to think of these as utility classes, right? Or utility methods that I don't have to actually instantiate the shopping cart to access, right? So I have these two utility methods that are part of the shopping cart class that I just want to access, and I want them to do something for me. And these two methods are actually the same method. They've just got a different method signature, right? Same method, different method signature, overloaded method. That's what it's called. Overloaded method, it has, here's the get cart, both the same method name. One takes an HTTP context base, and the other one takes a controller. Well, no, this controller is airing out. Why? Because we need another using statement up here. We need to use using web.mvc. There we go. So we need that as well, and then we won't have an error with our controller. So basically, we can take a controller. It takes the whole controller from the get cart method, and then it can return an HTTP context based on that controller. These two things are required for us to use to make that jQuery functionality work. Okay. The rest are normal methods. An add to cart method, right? Add to cart method takes an album, right? And we're going to read the album, and we're going to add that album to the cart, right? Okay, so that's what it's going to do. And also the next one is remove from cart. Remove from cart is actually going to look at an ID of the album to remove, and it's going to remove that. This is where the jQuery functionality and Ajax come into play with this one. We also have the empty cart method, which removes everything from the cart. So there's nothing left inside the cart. When we move from one cart to the other, or from the cart to the order, we do that. There's also the list cart method, or the get cart items, when we want to list everything in the cart. Get count, how many items are in the cart, as an example, which we're going to use later on when we have a little funky cart icon on the top right corner of our screen. We're going to have the number, how many items are in the cart. Get total calculates the total number of, or the total cost in dollars or whatever you want to make it for the actual cart. And then create order. Creates a brand new order and adds it into the database, right? That's what it does here. And then we get the cart ID, and we migrate the cart into the new order. So these are all the things in the shopping cart. Lots and lots of stuff. So it's quite a big class, and it's not really a model. I really think of it as more of a controller. I can even see it going in its own little folder altogether, like a logic or business logic or app code. If there's an app code method or folder, that's where it would probably go. Let's add that stuff in. Like a controller model. All right. So all that stuff is funky and nice, and this is the shopping cart itself. And again, I'm just using this right here, this shopping cart that I've added in here. Okay. I want to talk about view models a little bit and why we're using them. It's almost like yet another thing that John Galloway's used, the kind of the writer of this stuff, that doesn't quite match up with a view or a model. There's these little classes we're going to make. Two of them, it's almost like helper classes or singletons, the singleton pattern, if you will, right? And I want you to think of it like this. There's one class that's the shopping cart view model, right? The shopping cart view model is strictly, the shopping cart view model is strictly to get from the shopping cart. And the other one is to remove everything from the shopping cart. So one adds, the other one removes, okay? That's what I want you to think of it like. In order for us to do that, we're going to recommend adding in a new folder under View Models, so a brand new section for our code. So we're going to right-click here under the main root and add a new folder. We're going to call this folder View Models. There we go. Under our View Models folder, I'm going to right-click and add two new classes. So the first class is going to be called the Shopping Cart View Model. .cs. And I'm going to make one more, another view model. And like I said, these are like helper classes that kind of carry forward all the information from the shopping cart, so to help us do an add or a remove. Now you might say, well, why would we do that? And we'll talk about that in a second, why. Okay, so those are the two models. So basically we have our shopping cart remove view model and shopping cart view model. Those are the two things. And those two things are going to help us with the shopping cart itself. So whenever we want to change things in the shopping cart, we're going to access these two view models, almost like little helper classes to help us out. Okay. Here's what the first one looks like. All right, so there's not much in there. I'm going to copy this one. And for our shopping cart itself, the shopping cart view model really has one purpose, and it just lists the cart items. That's all it does. Right? So we're going to access the shopping cart view model to do this. Notice I'm getting an error with cart. The reason why is because I don't have access to the models folder. I got to do that. So I got to change models folder in there, and then I'll have access to the cart. So list of cart items. Think about, again, cart items as album items or store items that you want to add, right? Cart items is actually a better name than cart, right? Or order items, if you will. Something else. That might be a better name. And then the total of the cart, whatever is carried. So the only purpose of the shopping cart view model is to carry those two things: a list of items on the cart and the total cost of the cart as it sits right now. And it gets calculated and keeps track of. Almost like I need a place globally when I'm on the web to a container class that keeps track of those things, right? When I'm running the actual the shopping cart. And it's going to be kept track of temporarily in the database. It's going to be tracked in the database. Okay. From a persistence perspective. Is there another way to do this? Yes, there is. And then the remove model is actually going to create the object that it's going to fill this up with. By the way, I'm going to modify these in a second. So it's going to have a message that's going to say you removed whatever you removed, right? The cart total that you're removing. So I'm subtracting this much from the cart. It's going to keep track of that. What's my current cart count? My item count, right? And my delete ID, which is kind of interesting. Which of the items am I deleting? And you're going to get the delete ID from the actual view itself. Okay, that's why it's a view model, right? Now, because they're going to be scaffolded, these two things, I still want to use the public virtual, keyword. So I'm going to kind of copy these two things out, public virtual. And wherever I have public virtual, again, it's going to make my migrations a little easier. And that's why I'm adding those in. Again, this is all set up for just the cart. This is not even talking about the checkout, all right? The order itself. Okay. So one removes and one keeps track of the stuff that's on the cart. All right, cool. Finally, the shopping cart controller. And the shopping cart controller we're going to make is going to be in the controller folder, and it's going to be based on an empty controller class right now. So we're going to go to empty, right? If you notice, empty controller, right? We're going to add, and we're going to call this shopping cart. Okay, this is what we're going to use. This controller we're going to use to scaffold out the rest of the views that we need, right? So we have our index view and so on. Now, again, going back, we need access to a bunch of stuff. In our shopping cart, we're going to need access to the models in the store as well as our view models. Both of those have to be we have to use using statements for both of those. So using COMP2007.models and then using COMP2007.viewModels. Both those things we need access to. We're also going to need access to a reference to our music store context, where we're going to do a store DB. There's our music store context. And good to use the new keyword, Tom. And what we're going to do in here is once we've done that, we're going to add and remove stuff from the to the cart based on our music store context. We're going to access the music store itself, the albums from the music store, and all the genre and artists related to it, and add them into the shopping cart. Notice that our first action result uses this helper class getCart that's part of the shopping cart class from the view models folder, right? That's what we're doing. So shopping cart, remember, shopping cart is just one of the classes that we're using, but it's not this shopping cart, right? It's not part of my shopping cart controller. And again, that's why I'm not really happy with some of the naming conventions that they're using here. But we're going to do this. We're going to pass in the HTTP context of what the URL is right now. So we're going to say, hey, take that HTTP context. That's what we want to use. Then what we're going to do is we're going to create our view model, and we're going to create a new shopping cart view model. This new shopping cart view model is going to be used in order for us to get cart items, right, as well as get the total and store them in cart items and cart total. That's what we're going to do in our shopping cart view model. So it's just a transient class or a transient object that we're using to load things into our cart. Okay? Then we have an add to cart method as well as a remove from cart method that are going to relate to, if you notice the remove cart method, we're going to generate a new remove from cart object, all right, that we're going to use from our shopping cart remove view model. Okay, and we're going to fill that view model with this particular, we're going to initialize it with this stuff, our message that's going to say, this album has been removed from your shopping cart, the cart total, and so on. Okay, and then we're going to return the results as a JSON object. That's different than we've ever done before, right? It's an action result, right? But what we're doing is we're not returning a view, we're returning JSON data. And we can do that instead of a view. So that means that we're going to consume the JSON data on the front end with our jQuery. Okay. Whew, it's a massive class. Let's take a look at this thing, and I'm going to pull all this stuff in there now. I'm going to go down to here. So copy this. And we're just replace the stuff that's in here right now and paste. All right. So we've got all this stuff. Again, add to cart, remove from cart, all that functionality, as well as get a cart summary. One thing to note is the cart summary is something called a child action only. We're going to use the cart summary to create that link that says, hey, show me the cart, right? And how many items are in the cart. That's what this, this little cart summary is going to do for us. And we're going to use a different HTTP helper class to help us show that on the nav bar. Okay. Whew, shopping cart done, right? This part. Okay, before we go to Ajax updates with jQuery, I think it's a great place to stop. I'm going to upload all this stuff up to GitHub. So if you've missed any of this stuff and it went too fast, or anything that I've changed, you have all my code that you can always copy paste into your own. And it'll give us a chance to track our changes. So I'm going to go to Home, and I'm going to go to Changes. And if you notice, I've added all the shopping cart requirements in here for the shopping cart and the related classes. So added shopping cart controller and related models. Okay, now remember, we haven't done a migration yet. We just added these things in. We haven't even tested any of this out, right? So how would this work? And we're going to try and reduce the testing as much as possible. So when we get back, we'll talk about how we do Ajax updates with jQuery. And this is where I'm going to use some of my knowledge of jQuery and Ajax and TypeScript to help you make this thing work.